Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something pretty monumental. We're trying to chart out this incredibly detailed prophetic timeline from our source material.
Yeah, it's dense. It
Literally,
maps out
yeah.
the end times, really.
And our mission, well, it sounds simple, but it's definitely challenging.
Hmm.
We need to decode how two massive prophecies, Daniel's final 1 week, the 70th week, and the 2300-day period, how they actually lock together and run at the same time.
It's a real deep dive into the numbers, into the chronology, and the whole thing, it rests on one really specific assumption about how these things line up.
Okay.
We're basically working from the idea that the final 1 week, that's 7 prophetic years, so 2,520 days total, it has to start at the exact same instant as the 2,300-day clock.
Right, and that immediately throws up a flag, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because of Daniel 9.27, the bit about the covenant being broken in the midst of the week.
Exactly. If you take midst of the week to mean like the dead center point day 1260, then these two timelines can't start together. It just doesn't work mathematically.
So how do the sources handle that?
Well, to make the simultaneous start possible, they interpret in the midst of the week a bit differently. Not as one single day, but more like during the half of the week, a period within that first half.
Ah, okay, so it gives it some wiggle room.
Yeah, a little flexibility. And that interpretive move is what lets them synchronize the 2520-day clock and the 2300-day clock right from day one. It gives us this unified timeline for those final 7 years.
That structural tweak is everything then. So our main job today, and for you listening, is really to follow the sequence the sources lay out. We need to track these numbers, 1,335 days, 1260, 965, the final 220, to map out how things supposedly unfold.
From the very beginning of the Great Tribulation, through that really key event, the first resurrection, and then into the final judgments.
Okay, let's jump right in then. No time to waste. All right, so let's unpack this timeline. First, the big picture. The main framework is that final 1 week prophecy. 7 prophetic years. You said 2,520 days total. That's the whole span we're dealing with.
That's a container, yeah. And the starting gun for this 2,520-day countdown, it's triggered by a very specific person doing a very specific thing.
The son of perdition.
Exactly. He's the central villain in this apocalyptic drama. And he's not just some political figure. He's the direct catalyst for everything that follows.
And what does he actually do that starts the clock? The sources are really precise about this.
Extremely precise. It says he physically seats himself in the physical temple, what this source is called the building temple. That specific act, that moment of ultimate desecration, that's day one.
Day one of the 2520 days and day one of the 2300 days. Both start right there.
Simultaneously. It has to be the required public signal.
In this action, it achieves two things prophetically, right?
Yes, two necessary conditions. First, by planting himself there, claiming divine authority, he forces the cessation of daily sacrifices. He stops the regular religious services. And second, maybe even more importantly, his presence is the abomination of desolation. It signals the complete, overt trashing of what was considered holy ground.
But that's interesting because you also mentioned the sources say the actual holiness of that physical building left ages ago when Christ died. So why is defiling it now such a big deal?
It's about the timing, the marker. It acts as the undeniable physical starting point for everyone on Earth to see. It also kind of shows the depth of the enemy's delusion, right?
Fair.
Trying to rule from a place whose spiritual power source, according to this view, is long gone.
So desecrating it doesn't affect God's salvation plan, but it's needed to get the prophetic clock ticking visibly on Earth.
Precisely. It's the necessary signal.
So if the 2,520 days kick off right then, how do the sources break down this, massive chunk of time? This is where it gets really specific with the numbers.
Yeah, they divide the 2,520 days into 3 very distinct calculated phases. It moves from tribulation to cleansing to final judgment.
Okay, what are they?
Phase 1. This is the time of beast rule, intense tribulation, and it leads up to the single most crucial event for believers, the first resurrection. That lasts 1,335 days.
1,335.
Got it. Phase 2. This period is all about the spiritual work, the cleansing of what they call the actual sanctuary, and simultaneously on Earth, the pouring out of the 7 plagues. This covers 965 days.
965. Okay.
And phase 3, the final stretch. This is a rapid-fire series of final judgments against all the remaining opposition, both spiritual and political, and that lasts just 220 days.
Let me just check that. 335 plus 965 plus 220. Yes, that adds up exactly to 2520.
Right.
So this framework isn't loose at all. Every event has to slot into these exact windows.
Absolutely. The precision is key, and it really shifts the focus, doesn't it? Instead of just talking about the first half or the second half, it forces us to look at specific days, like what happens on day 1260 versus day 1335. That difference is critical here, and it's where this timeline often diverges from others.
Right, that 2335 number stands out immediately. Let's dive into that first case then. Okay, that initial 1335-day period. It starts with what most people call the Great Tribulation. But our sources actually define the persecution part as lasting 1260 days.
That's right. The familiar 42 months, or a time, times, and half a time, this is when things get really bad for the saints.
How so?
Well, this is the period of intense, organized persecution. The son of perdition and this global beast power are actively hunting down believers. The sources are very clear. This is a time where the saints' faith and endurance are pushed to the absolute limit. Martyrdom is a real part of this period.
And it's not just a political thing, is it? There's a religious element driving it.
Definitely. The sources emphasize this cooperative evil. You have the harlot of Babylon, who they identify as this global religious force, often linked to papal authority.
Okay.
And she's basically using the political machine, the world beast government, to carry out the persecution. It's like the religious power provides the justification and the reach, and the political power provides the muscle.
An unholy alliance, basically.
Through the full 1260 days, yes, the saints are literally being hunted.
You mentioned earlier that the saints themselves are seen as a kind of temple. How does their being trodden underfoot, as the sources say, connect back to the son of perdition sitting in the physical temple?
It's like the second part of the desecration. The first act was defiling the physical building, the stones, the structure. But these 1260 days of trampling the saints, that's the defilement of the living temple of God, his people.
Ah, I see.
The sources directly link this persecution to the prophecy about the holy city being trodden underfoot for 42 months. So the physical defilement and the personal defilement are running side by side during this time.
But the persecution isn't totally successful, is it? Isn't there some kind of protection mentioned?
Yes, there is. That's where the 144,000 come in. They are specifically designated in this view as a protective force. They're working during these 1260 days to shield the faithful, to some extent, from the full force of the beast.
So they act as a buffer.
A mitigating factor, yeah. They ensure the church isn't completely wiped out.
But you also said martyrdom happens. So the 144,000 aren't like an impenetrable shield for every single believer.
That seems to be the implication. The sources acknowledge that some saints will die for their faith during this time. It's still the ultimate test.
So the result after 1260 days is what? A battered church and a world dominated by this harlot beast combo.
Pretty much. A church under severe pressure and a world firmly under the thumb of this combined religious and political power. And critically, this brings us up to day 1260. Now, in many chronologies, that's the big midpoint event.
Not here.
Not here. For this specific timeline, day 1260 marks the end of that intense persecution phase. But it's not the climax. There's still something else to come before the truly blessed event.
Right. There's that gap. The 75 days between day 1260 and day 1335, this is where the timeline gets really unique.
This day 1335, is really the absolute pivot point for this entire chronology. We've moved 75 days past that traditional 1260-day mark, and the sources label day 1335 as the singularly blessed moment.
Why blessed?
Because this is the day of the first resurrection.
Okay, but that 75-day gap needs explaining. If the intense persecution lasts 1,260 days, why wait another 75 days for the resurrection? The reward, what's happening in that gap?
The reasoning given is, well, it's both theological and logistical within this specific prophetic structure. The core idea is that the resurrected saints have spiritual, incorruptible bodies.
Right.
And according to this view, they cannot and should not be present on earth to endure the divine wrath, the 7 plagues that are about to be poured out.
Ah, okay, so the resurrection has to happen before the plagues start.
Exactly. Therefore, day 1335 must mark the absolute end of the saints' personal experience of the Great Tribulation. The public persecution might end around 1260, but their time of trial fully concludes at 1335 with their removal.
So maybe those 75 days from 1261 to 1335 are like a final waiting period, or a time of separation before God takes the faithful out completely.
That seems to be the logic. The sources definitely link the removal of the righteous directly to the start of the most severe judgments, the 7 plagues. That 75-day gap creates the chronological separation needed to make sure the resurrected saints are spared, the judgments specifically aimed at the wicked, which begin immediately after they are resurrected.
A clean break.
A very clean break. The personal tribulation for the saints ends at 1335, not 1260.
And this first resurrection on day 1335, it's not just about rewarding the faithful, is it? The sources say it has massive implications, even for angels.
Huge implications. It goes way beyond just human salvation. It's presented as the ultimate verification of creation's righteousness.
Wow. How?
The sources argue that the resurrection acts as the final, decisive proof of God's perfect justice, his love, and the absolute truth and rightness of his commandments.
But how does seeing humans resurrected confirm anything about the angels' free will? That feels like a big jump.
It's positioned as the conclusive evidence. Think about it. Throughout history, there have been questions, even among heavenly beings perhaps, about obedience, about God's plan, about whether free will could truly lead to unwavering righteousness.
Okay.
So by witnessing the resurrection and glorification of humans, creatures who were tempted, who could sin, but ultimately chose righteousness, it provides the final, undeniable proof that God's way leads to eternal life. According to the sources, this experience definitively extinguishes any remaining possibility of sin among the loyal angels.
So seeing it play out successfully in humans settles the matter for them. Their own free will is now considered complete and fully verified because they've seen the victory of righteousness made manifest. No more doubts possible about God's plan or fairness.
That's exactly how the sources frame it. It removes all lingering questions about the justice of God's rule. The righteous choice, made through free will, is fully vindicated. And once that foundational spiritual work is done, confirming the loyalty of all righteous creation,
then the focus can shift entirely to judgment.
Precisely. Which brings us back to that other timeline running in parallel, the 2300 days.
Right, the 2300 days. We established they started back on day 1, same time as the 2520 days. Now, this 2300-day prophecy, according to the sources, it's answering 2 key questions, isn't it?
Yes. How long until the daily sacrifice is taken away, which happened back on day 1 with the son of perdition. And more critically for this phase, how long until the actual sanctuary is cleansed?
Okay, so the 2300 days.
Something like that. Day 1335 marks the moment when Christ, as high priest, moves into that final phase of cleansing the heavenly records.
And this mirrors the old Day of Atonement ritual where the high priest went into the most holy place and nobody else could enter the tabernacle while he was in there.
Yeah.
How does that play out here?
The sources point directly to Revelation 15, verse 8. It says the heavenly temple was filled with smoke from God's glory and power.
Okay.
And critically, no one could enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. This means for that entire 965-day cleansing period, access to the divine court, in a sense, is sealed off. The judgment process is underway.
And while heaven is sealed off for this cleansing, what's happening down on earth?
That's when the 7 plagues hit. The sources are explicit. As the spiritual cleansing of the actual sanctuary happens over these 965 days, earth experiences the most severe, direct judgments from God ever witnessed. This is the outpouring of wrath against those who rejected truth and persecuted his people.
So the end of the 2300 days, which is day 2335 plus 965 days, marks 2 things happening at the same time.
Exactly. On earth, the 7 plagues finally stop. And in heaven, the spiritual work is done. The actual sanctuary cleansing is complete.
We need to hammer this distinction home again, the difference between the 2 sanctuaries. The clock started with the son of perdition defiling the physical building temple on earth.
Right, that was the setup, the signal.
But the entire point of the 2300 days is the purification of the actual sanctuary.
Correct. The physical building in Jerusalem, in this view, is just a stage prop that marked the start time. It's prophetically significant as a marker, but not spiritually central anymore. The actual sanctuary, the heavenly place where Christ ministers, where the records are kept, that's what's being cleansed during the 965 days following the resurrection.
So defiling the building was just the trigger. Cleansing the actual sanctuary is the main event of the 2300 days. It's about purifying the record, validating the martyrs, finalizing the spiritual judgment before the physical end.
That's the core theological argument. Once those 2300 days finish, the primary work of separating righteous from wicked and purifying the heavenly record is done. But we're still not at the end of the 2520 days.
We still have that final 220-day chunk left.
The final wrap-up, the last intense phase.
Okay, so 2300 days are done, sanctuary cleansed, plagues finished. Now we enter the last 220 days needed to hit that full 2520-day mark of the 70th week. What happens in this final short period?
This stretch is all about the final physical and political cleanup, basically. The destruction of the remaining wicked powers on earth.
And it happens fast. 3 huge events packed into these 220 days. Let's take them one by one. First, the destruction of the harlot of Babylon.
Yeah, this is a dramatic turn. The red beast, that secular political power structure, the 10 horns, it suddenly turns against the harlot of Babylon, the religious system it was allied with.
The very system it used to persecute the saints for 1,260 days. Why the betrayal? If the political power needed the religious system before, what changes?
Well, the sources suggest that after the 7 plagues have ravaged the earth, which just finished right before this 220-day period starts, the whole global landscape is shattered. The political powers, the beast, likely realized they were manipulated or let down by the harlot.
Her influence is exposed as hollow.
Exactly. In the face of God's direct wrath, her claims ring false. So the beast turns on her, destroys her, burns her with fire. It represents the final judgment and removal of organized false religion as a power player.
Okay, so the religious power is gone. What's next? The focus shifts to the beast itself.
To its armies, yes. The second major event is Jesus Christ descending, presumably to Earth or its vicinity, to judge the armies of the beast. This is what people often think of as Armageddon, the final battle.
Right.
And the sources connect this judgment very specifically to something called the Atonement of Hades.
Atonement of Hades. That sounds unusual. It's not about forgiveness, is it?
No, not at all. It's about the final, complete application of judgment. The beast and the false prophet are dealt with, thrown into the lake of fire, and their rebellious armies are utterly defeated.
But why link it to Hades and atonement, which usually relates to sacrifice or purification? Is it like even the realm of the dead is being judged or cleansed?
That seems to be the idea. It's drawing a parallel perhaps to the brazen altar in the tabernacle, the place of judgment by fire. By calling it the Atonement of Hades, the sources might be saying that this final judgment settles accounts even for the realm associated with death and rebellion. It closes the book on organized opposition to God on earth.
Total judgment, then, which leads straight into the third and final act of these 220 days and the entire 2,520-day period.
The binding of Satan.
The ultimate conclusion.
Yes. Jesus Christ binds Satan, who is also referred to here as the scapegoat, with a great chain and throws him into the abyss for 1,000 years. With the harlot gone, the beast's armies judged, and the ultimate deceiver bound, the entire structure of evil is effectively neutralized.
In that moment, Satan being bound, that's day 2520, that marks the end of the 70 weeks prophecy and leads directly into the 1,000-year reign, the millennium.
Exactly. And it's really important to remember the 2 different completion points we've discussed.
Right. Let's summarize that duality.
The 2,300 days finish first, at the end of that 965-day period after the resurrection. Their completion marks the end of the spiritual work. The actual sanctuary atonement is done, and the free will of all righteous creation saints and loyal angels is verified as complete and irreversible.
Okay, spiritual work done at 2,300. Then the full 2,520 days conclude 220 days later. Their completion marks the end of the physical judgment on earth. The harlot destroyed, the beast judged, the atonement of Hades, Satan bound, everlasting righteousness established, and all major organized sin dealt with.
Every number, every phase has a distinct purpose in this intricate timeline. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, we have traced the entire circuit. Let me try and recap this incredibly dense timeline for you listening. It all kicks off on day 1 with the son of perdition desecrating the temple, starting both the 25,520-day and 2,300-day clocks.
Then we have 1,260 days of intense persecution driven by that harlot beast alliance.
Followed by the absolute pivot point on day 1335, the first resurrection. This rewards the saints and, crucially, verifies the free will of all loyal creation, including angels.
That resurrection then triggers the 965-day period of the Great Atonement. While the actual sanctuary is being spiritually cleansed in heaven, the 7 plagues fall on earth.
By day 2,300, the plagues end, and the actual sanctuary cleansing is complete. Spiritual accounts settled.
But we still have the final 220 days to finish the 2520 count. This is rapid-fire judgment. The beast destroys the harlot. Christ judges the beast's armies, the atonement of Hades, and finally, Satan is bound and thrown into the abyss.
Ending the 70 weeks prophecy precisely on day 2520.
The really profound insight from these sources, I think, is how the chronology prioritizes the spiritual reality. That 2,300-day count, ending earlier, points to the heavenly verification of righteousness, the success of God's plan regarding free will for the loyal. That's accomplished even while Earth is still facing the final physical judgments.
It's an extraordinary tapestry of numbers and theology, which leads us to a final thought. Given how much emphasis the sources place on verifying the completeness of righteous free will by day 2,300 for saints and angels.
Right.
It raises a really interesting question about what comes after the millennium. The sources mention that the free will of those judged after the 1,000 years, those involved in the Gog and Magog rebellion, that still needs to be tested and verified then.
Exactly. The main conflict is over, Satan is bound for a time, the sanctuary is cleansed, righteous free will is confirmed. But the testing mechanism itself doesn't seem to completely disappear from the picture.
So the final provocative thought for you to mull over is this. If verifying righteous free will is so central to this whole cosmic plan, what does the apparent necessity for a later postmillennial test involving groups like Gog and Magog suggest about the ongoing nature of accountability and the testing of free will within God's eternal kingdom, even after these major apocalyptic events are finished?
A fascinating question indeed, something to definitely ponder.
Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the numbers and prophecies of the final days.
We hope you found it insightful, and we look forward to exploring more source material with you next time.